He was not always a master chef. In fact, he first became interested in cooking as a schoolboy. A brother was stricken with scarlet fever. Mother was thus preoccupied, so he, the healthy boy, began cooking the family meals. That's how it all began. Mother would call out recipes from the sick room upstairs, and he would follow them as best he could. Simple dishes at first, then more involved ones. Eventually, he was improvising with most extraordinary success. His vegetable soup was spectacularly seasoned. In its preparation, he employed a number of tricks. The subtle inclusion of chicken stock, for example, the precise sequence in which the vegetables were added, and the whole thing was gently laced with boiled nasturtium stems. His peach and apple and cherry pies, he called it satisfactory. Everybody else said they were sumptuous. Before long, even the young boy's school friends respected his destiny as a master chef. He always said the best food is no better than the manner in which it's prepared. While still a young man, he attended a cook's and baker's school. But by then he might have taught the courses he took. His revolutionary concepts, such as the addition of flower parts to certain recipes, created quite a stir among his peers, eventually in the newspapers. But this is the rest of the story. When the master chef got married, his bride had no idea of his culinary prowess. She had warned him, in fact, that her own cooking ability began and ended with fudge. "That's as much as I know how to make," she said, "fudge." And she'd wondered why he had seemed so unconcerned. During their first months of marriage, dutifully, she enrolled herself in a basic cooking class at a local YWCA. She did learn how to mix mayonnaise, but then promptly dropped out. Well, that was when her new husband smiled, stepped into the kitchen, and astonished his bride with a flurry of delicious chicken, pork, and lamb, seafood dishes. He amazed her with a baked bean recipe for which he later became famous. He demonstrated for her how adding melted butter to pancake mix allowed one to cook the pancakes on a dry griddle. He proudly showed her how throwing a sirloin tip directly onto a bed of coals would bring out the flavor as nothing else could. And he grilled, and he fried, and he chilled, and he boiled, and he broiled, and he sliced, and he diced his way right into his bride's heart. Now, you have forgotten, if you ever knew, that this master chef was a master chef. And yet among chefs, his recipes are followed to this day. And forgotten also is his skill at sewing. Oh, yes, it was he who altered his wife's dresses and expertly cooked her meals before he marched off to Europe and to war and into history. The master chef became a general and ultimately President of the United States, Dwight Eisenhower. And now you know the rest of the story.
And now the rest of the story. Dwight David Ike Eisenhower was a man of many talents, that much is clear. Between 1948 and 1953, Ike was president of Columbia University in New York City. While president of the university, Ike watched artist Thomas Stevens paint a portrait of his wife, Mamie. Ike was fascinated that the artist could transform a blank canvas into something beautiful. Ike wondered if he could capture someone's likeness on canvas as Thomas Stevens had. Ike stretched a white dust cloth on the bottom of a box for a canvas and attempted to copy Mamie's portrait. Ike showed his painting to Mamie and Thomas. Ike described the painting as weird and wonderful to behold and added, "We all laughed heartily." Thomas asked if he could keep this painting as a keepsake. In exchange, Thomas sent Ike a painting kit, which Ike thought was a sheer waste of money. Now see, Ike's true passion was playing golf, but when he was unable to play golf, he painted. In a 1950 letter to Winston Churchill, Ike wrote, I have a lot of fun since I took it up. In my somewhat miserable way, your hobby of painting? I have no instruction, have no talent, and certainly no justifications for covering nice white canvas with the kinds of daubs that seem constantly to spring from my brushes. Nevertheless, I like it tremendously, and in fact have produced 2 or 3 things that I like enough to keep. He described his portrait paintings as magnificent audacity, and then burned most of them. Unlike Churchill, who enjoyed spending hour after hour outside painting landscapes, if the weather was good enough for Ike to sit outside and paint, it was good enough to go play golf. Now, Ike was President of the United States from January 20th, 1953 until January 20th, 1961. During his presidency, Ike had a small studio on the second floor of the White House where he would paint for 10 minutes before lunch. Rather than using his paintings as a way to express his inner self, Ike preferred to reproduce what he saw before him. While at the White House, Ike painted this portrait he called Melancholy Lincoln, based on the 1854 photo of the 45-year-old attorney Abraham Lincoln. Ike also liked to paint when he visited a place former Presidents Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Truman called Shangri-La, after the fictional Himalayan paradise. All presidents since then have used this Maryland presidential retreat, but it's now known as Camp David. Ike wrote to a friend, "Shangri-La was just a little too fancy for a Kansas farm boy." So, in 1953, his first year as president, he nicknamed it Camp David. Now, where did he come up with that name? Ike was born David Dwight Eisenhower. Now, wait a minute. I thought it was Dwight David Eisenhower. Well, Ike was named David Dwight Eisenhower at birth. At some point, Ike's mother, Ida, decided to transpose the names to avoid confusion with Ike's father, David Jacob Eisenhower. Ida did not want her son being called David Jr. The family Bible and high school yearbooks listed him by his birth name, David Dwight Eisenhower. But Ike didn't nickname the presidential retreat Camp David after himself or his father. Ike nicknamed the retreat Camp David after his 5-year-old grandson, and the name stuck. On one visit, Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev said it sounded like a place where stray dogs were sent to die. Russians. Ike's grandson, David, eventually grew up and got married. He married a girl named Julie Nixon, Richard Nixon's daughter. Did you know that? In 1967, when some of Ike's paintings were displayed at a show in a New York art museum, Ike told a reporter they would have burned this expletive a long time ago if I weren't the President of the United States. In the last 20 years of his life, he painted about 260 paintings. But Ike had no false pride in his artistic abilities, but he enjoyed it and never gave up. And that's all that matters. Now let's take a look at some of Ike's paintings. He truly was a man of many talents. I'm Brad Dyson. Thanks for watching. And now you know the rest of the story.